So listen to this. In 1999, Michael Owen was brought into an event where he was supposed to teach kids how to play football, and instead, the second youngest Ballon d'Or winner of all time proceeded to ignore every single one of them, repeatedly demolishing the poor 13-year-old goalkeeper, smashing volley stop ins, putting it in between his legs, dribbling around him, shipping it over him, celebrating like it was a World Cup final after every goal, laughing at the kid constantly, claiming that poor old Jamie has no chance. Even after smacking him in the face, he kept going, no matter how many times the coach standing by them made snide remarks about his behavior, famously telling him, "Well done, he's 13. But you gotta realize, yes, Michael Owen was the best player on the planet, a two-time Golden Boot winner, a Galactico, the poster boy of England's golden generation, but really, this behavior was always a problem. So much that after 17 years at 5 different clubs, all the fans either hated him or couldn't care less about him. And it isn't even just that he was a huge traitor or that he seemingly couldn't go a day without talking trash about him. It's because he really was just a weird guy. Even the Telegraph, one of the most respected newspapers in England, called him the cringe god, chronically unable to detect when a guideless moment might be clipped up for social media. Michael Owen is the kind of guy whose favorite drink is water, the kind of guy who posts pictures of himself smiling next to a dead ferret. When they asked him what his favorite movie was, he replied none, because movies are fake and he doesn't like being lied to. When they asked him for a Christmas confession, he admitted to throwing a dart at his friend, sticking it in his leg, and being shocked that he didn't move out of the way. I mean, I could go on. He says he's never tasted coffee or tea and that he only learned to make them after turning 40, or that his mom managed his bank account until he was 38, not to mention the most awkward monotone adverts you'll ever see, and of course the fan favorite, some of the most useless football commentary ever, such as whichever team scores the most goals usually wins. The problem with rain is that it makes the pitch wet, or to stay in the game, you gotta stay in the game. But honestly, looking back at his childhood, a lot of this behavior starts to make sense. Look, Michael's dad was also a professional footballer, except for the fact that after 2 appearances for Everton, he fell down to the 3rd tier and never really got back to the top, which meant that, instead, he tried to live out his dream through his son. From the age of 6, as Michael has admitted, he planned my life, our entire lives, so that I'd become a professional footballer. When I was 8, I even overheard him putting a bet that I'd play for England one day. Fast forward a bit, and at age 10, still living in Wales, Michael didn't just break Ian Rush's record of 72 goals in a season that had stood for over 20 years. He demolished it by hitting 97, and in a flash, after having supported Everton all his life, Liverpool came in trying to recruit him, and at the advice of his father, that very same day, I ceased to be a fan. Which explains a lot. Regardless, at Liverpool, with the young Gerrard playing by his side, it was almost embarrassing at times. As the two said, every time Stevie got the ball, he'd pass it to me, and every time I did, Michael would score. So, by 16, Owen was brought into the FA Youth Cup where most players were already over 18, and goddamn, a hat-trick in the quarters to clinch a win in extra time against United, who historically pretty much owned the competition, then another in the semi first leg to win 4-2, then 2 more goals in the second leg after they went behind 3-0, and in the final, going up against the West Ham squad with Rio Ferdinand and Frank Lampard in it, he misses the first leg and comes back to score, turning around yet another game, totaling 11 goals in 5 matches to take the first trophy of its kind in Liverpool's history. As you may imagine, after that, they had no choice but to hand him a contract the day he turned 17, and after being handed his debut with 2 games left in the season, immediately scoring, as the newspapers claimed he was the only one who could breathe new life into this corpse of a team, they went a step further. They handed the kid the number 10 shirt. So, despite a slow start, in November he just went nuts, with one of his coaches already claiming that he played in the Premier League like it was an under-11 match. He ended up taking 28 goal contributions in the next 28 matches, becoming the youngest ever to play for England and scoring his first Premier League hat-trick to total 41 contributions for club and country, leapfrogging every other striker in the country to take the Golden Boot, becoming the youngest to ever do so by a margin season of 4 years, while being just 3 assists short of overtaking David Beckham at the top of the assist charts as well, all only a few months after turning 18. There are no words for it. He was and still is the greatest teenager in Premier League history, and by quite a margin. As some newspapers put it was so fast, it was like playing against a road runner. And before anyone even thought for a second of saying that it was beginner's luck or a purple patch of any kind, already the youngest goal scorer in England's history, he was called up to the World Cup and scored again after only 12 minutes on the pitch, earning a place in the starting 11 for the last 16 matches against Argentina, where he made Roberto Ayala, soon to be named UEFA's Defender of the Year, look like a total amateur, winning a penalty 10 minutes in and then going past him, as well as the whole defense just 6 minutes later to score what would be ranked as the third best goal in England's history, putting them 2-0 in front, only to be knocked out in a penalty shootout no matter what. After that, Owen had risen to national hero status. Even the great Maradona commented that it was the only good thing to come out of the '98 World Cup. Liverpool made him the highest paid teenager in history, and the trend continued. 3 games in against Newcastle, he bangs in a volley for the first, then puts it in between the keeper's legs for the second, and finally makes it past 2 defenders and slots it in without breaking his stride to make it a hat-trick in 15 minutes. As Owen rubbed his hands together, the commentator just sighed and insisted that he had run out of things to say about this boy, and unfortunately for him, only a month later, Owen was banging 4 goals against Nottingham Forest, forcing him to figure something out, as only 8 days after turning 19, the kid was already stepping up to 4th place in the Ballon d'Or. But as every fan in the country began chanting that Brazil have Ronaldo but we have Michael Owen, it all became oddly ominous when, out of nowhere, just like the Brazilian, Owen's hamstring snapped, sidelining him for the rest of the season, as the doctors claimed that, with his acceleration, it was only a matter of time until it happened, and as the teenager somehow, despite only playing little more than 2/3 of the available minutes, managed to retain his golden boot, still hitting 30 goal contributions for the year. By the following season, he was hanging by a string, only playing the full 99 out of Liverpool's 43 games, somehow still being their top scorer as his team repeatedly rushed him into the pitch, realizing they could not qualify to Europe without him, though eventually Owen himself would claim that, "After that, my body was compromised, our physio left in the summer and he didn't bring in another one for a year, and with no regular medical care, a routine injury ended up scarring me for the rest of my career." They had sabotaged their own golden boy. So, once Owen went out to the Euros and looked absolutely toothless, many already worried this would end up being one of the most premature downfalls in history, but then something happened. With everyone raving about United's treble winners, all of Liverpool drowned in shame as they were now going on 6 years without any trophies at all. So Owen decided to make them the first ever English team to take 5 in a single year. With Liverpool taking the League Cup while he was still struggling to fully recover from his injury, Owen finally came back for good to hit an absurd peak of form with 12 goal contributions in the final 6 games of the season, playing arguably the best match of his career as they went up against Arsenal in the FA Cup final, finding his team 1 goal down with 7 minutes left on the clock and bringing the game level with an almost acrobatic shot before he dashed down the pitch in classic Michael Owen fashion, leaving all defenders in the dust before hitting the cleanest strike onto the far post, showing Thierry Henry how it's done. Then, just 4 days later, coming up in the UEFA Cup final, assisting Gerrard to put him in front 2-0, then dribbling the keeper, forcing him to bring him down and winning the penalty that set the score at 3-1, eventually being subbed off to applause as mere minutes were left on the clock, even though his team would almost choke the title going into extra time and only winning thanks to an own goal. Regardless, now Liverpool already had 3 trophies in the bag. There was so much hype that the strange news that Owen had bought a whole neighborhood of houses for his family to live in almost went under the radar, and so, with the guy opening up the next season with a hat-trick against Oliver Kahn's Germany, he once again forced the whole world to stop, watch, and fear him, which was more than justified once he twisted up Gary Neville in order to score the winner in the Community Shield, and even more when 2 weeks later he showed up against Bayern Bayern in the European Super Cup, putting in a great run to assist the opener and then another to score his own, leading Liverpool up 3-0, taking that trophy as well, to finally make it 5 in a year and extend his streak to 24 goal contributions in 13 matches. Enough that, even after getting sidelined for a month, by December, still only 21 years old, against all the odds, he beat Raúl Cannon Beckham to the Ballon d'Or as the second youngest winner ever, outdone only by Ronaldo, and the first Englishman to win it since 1979, and the last one to this day. As you can imagine, this meant one thing. The moment Owen closed out his season, hitting 41 goal contributions, getting within inches of leading Liverpool to the league title, being named England's captain for the first time, and serving as their only redeeming feature at the World Cup, Florentino Perez was foaming at the mouth, coming after him, claiming that the best players must play for Real, only for Gerard Houllier to hit him back saying that they might be able to afford Ronaldo, but they cannot afford Michael Owen. For that kind of money, they could only buy his left foot. But really, it wouldn't be quite like that. Though Owen rejected them, determined to lead Liverpool to their first league title in 13 years, once again, their form would collapse just 11 matches into the season, eventually missing out on the Champions League, as not even a win over United in the League Cup final was enough to satisfy their 23-year-old striker who, after all, had already hit 100 Premier League goals, going all out, admitting that Liverpool had to fix up if he was ever to stay, only to instead watch them become more dependent than ever, with Sam Allardyce at one point joking that all you have to do to get a result at Anfield is to stop Michael Owen, which became a lot easier once he got sidelined for 2 months, leading to Gerard Houllier sacking and ultimately putting the kid who had been their top scorer for 7 seasons in a row at the mercy of Florentino Perez, who quickly made him an offer he couldn't refuse, though this move would quickly expose the real reason why he was so unsure about leaving Liverpool. The second Owen landed in Madrid, he realized he was just not built for it. The kid was living alone in a hotel, spending all of his time in his room, seemingly staring at a wall whenever he wasn't driving back and forth to the airport in order to get English newspapers. And worse is that he wasn't just struggling to adapt to the country, he was also struggling to adapt to the league, being dogged on by the media after going his first 2 months without scoring, though really, even while being forced to share the spotlight with Raúl and Ronaldo, he would still finish the season with 30 goal contributions for club and country, outscoring Raúl, who had far more game time than him, getting about the same rate of minutes per goal as Ronaldo, and even scoring in El Clásico. But meanwhile, missing out on the one moment that would have made him a legend at Liverpool, watching his old teammates defy all the odds under new manager Rafa Benitez, and miraculously take the Champions League title, immediately running back to England begging for a second chance, and though they seemed to be considering it, then Newcastle showed up out of nowhere, offering a club record €25 million for his signing, on the advice of Alan Shearer, who, having become close friends with Owen, wanted him to be the heir to his legacy, and immediately Liverpool were priced out of the deal, pretty much forcing Owen to join Newcastle as he needed the game time in order to guarantee a call-up to next year's World Cup. The only problem being that, with Owen being Owen, he couldn't even pretend he was happy about it. He forced them to put a release clause in his contract that allowed him to leave to Liverpool for cheap if they ever wanted him back. Only a few days after being presented to 20,000 fans like a hero, we repeatedly let it slip in an interview that Newcastle were next best, that if it were up to him, he'd have gone to Liverpool. The guy was so annoyed that he had to join Newcastle, he refused to even move to the city, instead buying a £2 million helicopter, building a helipad in his house in Wales, and signing up for a pilot's license so he could go back and forth in under an hour whenever he needed. And if all these shenanigans were enough to get the Newcastle fans already rolling their eyes, then he went out injured before the season even started. What followed were 8 goal contributions in his first 8 matches back, only for him to break his foot 2 weeks later, get sidelined for good, and just completely panic, repeatedly insisting that he'd be ready for the World Cup no matter how much everyone else insisted it was impossible, coming back with 2 games left in the season, not even being able to play the second one of those, but somehow convincing Sven-Goran Eriksson to bring him into the tournament regardless, where by the 3rd game he went in and 51 seconds later he was carried out on a stretcher. he had torn his ACL. If before he had all right to blame Liverpool for overplaying him or for how poorly they took care of him after his injury, this one was all on him. And it'd be far, far worse. As he said, for the final 7 years of my career, I was petrified of running. I just knew I'd tear a muscle. I lost everything that day. I couldn't wait to retire. Once the fastest player in the league, Owen's wings had now been clipped. Worse than even Van Basten or George Best, his career was effectively over at 25. The whole situation was so severe that Newcastle would pretty much sue everyone in sight, claiming the national team should have never allowed him to play. In the end, they got £10 million in compensation, while FIFA would be forced to start an injury fund in case this ever happened again, effectively changing the rules of the sport forever. Meanwhile, Owen, he would never be called up to a tournament again, and believe it or not, after virtually 595 days on the sidelines, once he was finally back on the pitch, the first thing he did was bring up rumors of a move to one of the top four, pissing off his own club president so much that he outright claimed that none of those four clubs would ever want him. And indeed, already 28 by the time he started playing regularly, still going out injured 3 times that season and totaling only 13 goals, it seemed like, though early in his career, he felt like a new kind of striker, a prototype for the modern era, dominating defenders with speed rather than power. After so much time out, the game had caught up to him, and so that next season was just sad. Owen pretty much ran out his contract, waiting for the chance to go out on a free deal, but instead, with Alan Shearer taking over as manager midway through the season, he ended up destroying their relationship as Shearer realized his supposed heir couldn't care less about the club, repeatedly insisting he wasn't fit no matter how many x-ray scans showed he was fine, even refusing to play their biggest game of the season, watching as Newcastle lost and got relegated for the first time in the Premier League era. After that, he was done. Not a single soul wanted him in that city, and worse, the moment the market opened, the only club willing to sign him was Hull City. It was rock bottom. Owen was suing newspapers left and right for claiming that no club wanted him, that he was bound to retire at the age of 29, though his agent was really being forced to go door to door with a 34-page document where he desperately insisted his new client wasn't finished. And that would probably have been the end, and likely should have been, had Man United not lost Ronaldo and Tevez in one go, failing to secure the signing of any player between Benzema, Villa and Ribéry, leading Sir Alex to try to pull one more of his deadline day stunts, signing Owen on a deal where he'd only pay him game by game if he was even able to play. Not to mention that by joining them, he killed any remaining sympathy the Liverpool supporters may have still had for him, to the point they have literally forced the club to stop wishing him happy birthday. Still, at United, don't get me wrong, Owen was pretty decent for the miserable amount of game time that he got, famously clutching the Manchester derby only a month after arriving, getting his first Champions League hat-trick and even scoring a decisive goal in the final of the League Cup. But that very same game, he got injured and was out for months. The next season, he barely even left the bench, only narrowly racking up enough minutes to be eligible to finally take a Premier League medal. And after watching his teammates lose out on the Champions League final, he stayed for one last year, being restricted to just 4 games with yet another injury, and somehow still refused to call it quits, ending up at Stoke City where he retired in absolute misery, being benched by Peter Crouch as he finally scored his 150th Premier League goal at 33, even though his 100th had been scored a decade earlier.